we employ pilots who work for other people, and so there is a natural progression, if you like, of pilots through the industry in Australia. So people will start perhaps flying a turboprop and then want to move on to a jet. So we take pilots from that stream, but we've only been in existence for 3 years, and our early experience was that we looked to recruit pilots who were mature and who were experienced in other parts of the world. And there are a lot of pilots, Australian pilots, who were looking for the opportunity to return home. And so we were very fortunate in that we were able to recruit very experienced pilots from other parts of the world. And that experience sits within our organisation to this day.
So you don't actually take on board bush pilots and train them, you take on experienced pilots and endorse them. Do the pilots you take on have to be endorsed in your aircraft, or they're already endorsed?
They come to us as part of the entry requirement into the company, if you like. They have to obtain an endorsement on our aircraft type. But I think that in the broadest sense, the pilots, we don't recruit bush pilots. In the broadest sense, that pilots will have gained their experience in the turboprop market, if you like.
Okay.
Can I follow on that,
Okay.
please, Chair?
No, you've warmed up now, have you?
Yeah. I have an early start. Mr. Berry, could we, if you take it on notice, could you provide the committee with a breakdown of where your pilots have been recruited from? Could you do that for us, as we have requested from other companies?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. And that includes international, regional, other airlines. Thank you.
Senator Xenophon.
Just want to cover a few areas related to pilot training, cabin crew fatigue management, and the show cause issue. And I understand you've got some constraints. I should disclose I do fly Tiger Airlines. I haven't been held up more than 40 minutes, and and I find it interesting that I get many calls and emails from pilots who are unhappy about aspects within their airlines. I haven't had one from a Tiger pilot yet, so I don't know what that means, but I think it's interesting.
Is this a paid advertisement?
No. I'm just saying that I haven't. I think I find it interesting. I think it's interesting. I haven't had any complaints from Tiger pilots. Well,
Dad, come on.
No.
We're only doing a bit of leg pulling here.
Can I just go to the issue of pilot training, where you get your pilots from? There's a proposal following the Colgan air crash in the United States. Congress passed an act of Parliament that, with very few exceptions, a pilot of a passenger of a large passenger aircraft, or I think 40 or 50 seats or over, would have to have 1,500 hours experience before they could get into the cockpit, even the right-hand seat, even the first officer's seat. What is your view of that proposal to have a minimum mandated requirement of experience, and also the quality of experience for a large passenger aircraft?
Okay. Can I ask Tim to answer that question, please?
I think this goes back to our original submission, Senator, and I think this was the key driver for us wishing to engage with this process. That fundamentally the key determinant, in my judgment, about the safety outcome is the value of the training that the pilot has received. So a blunt measure that says the pilot must have 1,500 hours is, in my judgment, simply a blunt measure. The better measure is the quality of the training that he has received. So,
but there must be. I mean, you can have high quality training, but if you want to, I think you want to have someone 50 hours flying experience in the right-hand seat, though, would you? Or 100 hours flying experience?
No, and even within the cadet pilot training schemes that there are, the pilot does, in general, even if they start with no flying experience at all, get to around about 300 hours before they would find themselves in the right-hand seat of a jet aircraft.
Tiger doesn't have a cadet flying pilot, cadet training scheme, does it?
At the moment, Senator, is our threshold at the moment is 2,000 hours, so it's actually in excess of the.
So it's company policy, not less than 2,000 hours. So I think for the right-hand seat.
Yes, and I think what we're saying is, I think the concern is, and this is why the debate is important and relevant, is clearly, as an industry, we want to ensure that there is a good supply of high caliber, highly qualified pilots as we go forward. And, to take Senator Heffernan's point around bush pilots, just flying around the bush for 1,500 hours may not make you a good pilot to come into a
Sure,
A320 operation.
I understand that, but does that mean that there is it's a balance, further to what Mr. Berry said, is there a balance between a minimum number of hours and for the quality of that training to be, it's a sort of a hybrid of the two?
Exactly, and I think our view would be the better the quality of the training and the more tailored it is and the more appropriate it is, perhaps that means the reduction in hours is more appropriate. So if someone has been tailored in their training to operate our type of aircraft from the very, very early stages of their experience, and they've done a very intensive training on that aircraft type, then that might justify a lower number of hours than someone who just came in with a lot of experience but not necessarily as tailored.
So in terms of low number of hours, one of the intriguing things that we've come across, and obviously the public wants to be ensured that the pilots know what they're doing, and the only time you really find out if you know what you're doing is when something goes wrong. The multi-purpose licence, where you qualified or we train people to fly aircraft, one of your airliners in the right-hand seat, but they're not qualified to fly a light aircraft. Do you overcome that by, I have to say, whether you're learning to ride a 80cc motorbike before you get on a 1000cc motorbike, there's some sense in that. Do you like to overcome that by just selecting higher up the pecking order, which would make sense to me?
I think, actually, Tim's experience is pretty vast in this area. Having been through, if you recall from the previous hearing, having almost been through a cadet program himself, and then going through ultimately to become an AFE, and then effectively now our Director of Operations here. I think it's probably wise if Tim just takes you through the process now, and would be able to explain why that actually, how we approach the business, how he approaches our business, how we approach the business together to make sure that we get the highest quality at all times in our airline. And that doesn't apply in Tiger. It's applied in previous airlines that I've worked for, and I think it's a moment for that, if you don't mind.
Well, I think that for us the discussion is to some extent academic, because we are in the fortunate position that we are a small organisation. Our recruitment needs are small, and we are able to source people into the organisation of the kind that I described earlier, people who have had experience either in other jet operators or on the turboprop. Now, however, as I said earlier on, my interest in this area really stems from the fact that I have experienced over 20 years now, these cadet pilot schemes have been flourishing in Europe, and they are the primary source of pilot recruitment into airlines such as Lufthansa, British Airways, Aer Lingus. The cadet pilot entry program is a well-proven product. The development of that in terms of the MPL is something that it has been progressed internationally and had its roots in ICAO. So these schemes are well thought through, and they deliver a first-class product, and they're designed to detect individuals through the process who aren't first class and move them to one side. So these schemes are very well tried and tested. We're, I guess, as I said earlier on, in the fortunate position, if you like, of being able to say, well, we don't need to engage with that. We need to engage with that at some point in the future. But so I think we can express an objective view on the matter. I mean, to go back right to the beginning of this inquiry, my personal experience is that I was sitting in the right-hand seat of a 4-engine transport aircraft when I had 300 hours of experience, and the reason I was doing that was because I was in the military, and it's absolutely accepted, has been for a very long time now, that military pilots receive first-class training, and it enables them to go into combat with a few hundred hours under their belt, and it's essentially establishing the principle that the key determinant in terms of the effectiveness of the pilot is his training.
Yeah. Can I just ask on that then, the 1,500 hours? Is there potential for it to, if that was to come in, for it to actually have a perverse outcome because the requirement would simply be the hours? Then there wouldn't be the attention to the detail of the quality of training?
Well, I think there's two aspects to this. First is that if there was to be a blanket requirement for 1,500 hours, then you would immediately deny Australian aviators with less than 1,500 hours the opportunity to work in Australia. They would be able to find jobs in Europe because the systems in Europe wouldn't have that. So they would be able to move away from Australia and work. And at the same time, you would develop a hole in the Australian aviation market, which would probably need to be filled from elsewhere. So that, I think, is the first potential perverse outcome. The other perverse outcome is that if we go back to the bush pilot, the Australian pilot wishing to seek employment in Australia under that kind of rule would need to do his training, go off and fly in the bush somewhere, gain his 1,500 hours, and then work his way into aviation that way. Whilst pilots are flying in the bush, and I don't wish to denigrate anybody in this discussion, but I mean it is a fact that you're yeah. Sorry, Senator. You're flying by yourself. You're not under the guidance of an experienced pilot sitting in the left-hand seat, and you are simply gaining your own experience. And I go back to again my earlier evidence. It's a bit like learning to drive a car. The point at which you are at your peak, probably in terms of your control of the car, is the point that is the day you pass your driving test. And from that point, our performance, we like to think we get better, but generally our performance is deteriorating. And so flying by yourself is not the best way to learn is it the best way to learn about how to fly an airplane is to be well trained, and then to obtain your guidance from an experienced pilot in the left-hand seat of the aircraft. So I think that so to your point, I think that if there was a blanket requirement for 1,500 hours, it would have a perverse outcome.
Thanks.
I'll just follow through on this issue of pilot training. A number of pilots have expressed concerns about a cadet scheme that one of the other airlines is looking at, where could be as little as 150 to 200 hours experience. And they're saying that if you're in a sticky situation, if it's lousy weather, they want someone with more experience. They don't have to be supervising every aspect of that cadets, or if God forbid, the pilot has a heart attack, then you've got a 180-seat aircraft under the control of someone with as little as 200 hours experience. What's your view to having a cadet scheme with a couple of hundred hours experience, and you compare that to, say, the Qantas cadet scheme, where they do have people with a couple of hundred hours experience, but they're second officers. They sit at the back of the plane and they observe. They're not in the right-hand seat. How do you get the balance between you've got your minimum threshold, well, your minimum threshold now of 2,000 hours, but shouldn't there be some mandated minimum for a large capacity passenger aircraft? Bearing in mind you need to have quality controls as well.
Well, I think it's absolute to all of the things that I have said, that the training that there is within the 200 to 300 hours has to be of the absolute best quality, and all of the training schemes that there are rely on competency assessments as you progress through the process. We as the airline, when we take a pilot on, obviously we require him to have a license, which he will have gained through his 200 or 300 hours. But we then put the individual through our own processes to determine his competence.
Flight simulators?
So we will go through simulator training.
Yeah. You have them here, and what do you use? You use them out of Melbourne? Where do you have
them?
Yeah,
we use the ANSET training facility in Melbourne. So he would go through a process of simulator training, and he then goes through a process of training on the line. Now, each of those processes within the context of the schemes that I've described must be tailored to the needs of the individual.